Welcome to the show. Today, we're exploring how organizations can turn AI from ambition into real business value. Jeffrey Garwood, AVP of Data and AI Service Line, joins us to share insights on the data foundations, AI-ready architectures, and practical strategies that help companies scale AI successfully across sales, service, marketing, and more. If you want to make AI work, not just experiment, you'll want to hear this. Let's get into it. So Jeff, every organization is continuing to say this is our year of AI, which they've been saying for the past 3 years, right? And they will continue to say for the next 10 years probably. But that's why I thought it was really pertinent to have you on the show today, because data and AI is going to continue to be at the tip of the spear of everything a business is going to be thinking about into the next decade. And so as we think about that, what advances are you seeing right now in the world of data and AI that are opening up new opportunities for organizations to bring in AI and data?
Oh, sure, sure. And yeah, it's so true. It is not slowing down at all. So if you look at the pace of change, it's actually truly unprecedented. Even just the tools I'm using at home, it's crazy how much advance. And then in the enterprise, the advances are moving a lot. One perspective I have is that I was able to go to the New York has the world tour over at Javits, and they also had the AI summit right next to us. I got to go between the two of them. And the thing that really stood out from last year, the prior year was all about the models. There was tools and models and a lot of couple apps and things. But this year shifted to basically platforms to drive and deliver enterprise grade AI. That was really the underlying thing. So what can bring governance, security, auditability, controls, but also the flexibility across models for cost, performance, scalability. So it's basically, it's like any new technology, right? It started with a lot of experiment. People are rolling their own of different projects and trying things out. And it's really moving up the stack to more enterprise grade things. And then to get a few more specific things is, if you look at the use cases across the enterprise too, the data is becoming more accessible. Things like zero copy, where you reach out to systems and pull data without moving it, MCPs, freeing up data and processes, and then also deeper partnerships between vendors, right? The ability to flow data back and forth is a lot of that. But I do want to point out one before we move to the next question. One big, I think, basically a seismic shift in Salesforce. And there was a bunch of things out in the news, right, about where things are succeeding or not. But a lot of it, if you look at the advances that are moving to tackle those things, there was a big shift where Salesforce with Agent Script is weaving together now predictive and agentic reasoning.
Mm.
And why that's important is there's sometimes you want to do something like you want to get a calculation, you want to get a specific answer. Let's say you got a refund and prorating and all that stuff. You can't have the agent kind of make it up on the fly
Yeah.
and then do agent stuff, right? So basically weaving those two experiences together, go get a real answer. Now take your agent and figure out, is it in policy? Did they have the documentation? Are they gaming the system? And then pulling those together to drive real new use cases. I think that's opening up a wide vista of things that really weren't there before. So
So on that wide list of things, you drilled into kind of the expanding world of use cases, and so when we're thinking about organizations and when they say the phrase "I want to use AI," right? What problems do you see them right now trying to solve, and where do you see the biggest disconnect between kind of the ambitious "we want to use AI" versus the
Mhm.
operational reality of what they can put into their organization?
Sure, sure. Maybe one way to look at it is who's asking for AI, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're all looking to get things done. I'll use that term. I've seen other ones, but get things done. They want to get things done more readily. They want it more accurately. They want it more effectively. If you kind of look at who the constituents are, like employees are already using AI at home, right? They're using it in their personal lives. They're learning creativity, writing kids' books at night, custom kids' books for their kids, and they're coming into work expecting things to move faster. They want to have better understanding of the customers who they're interacting with, and they just want to manage complexity of like showing up to work, right? Take that complexity down for me so I can do more. And then you kind of got the management layer that's focused on KPIs and performance and execution and talent retention and institutional knowledge capture, because there are turnovers in some industries, especially like manufacturing. The old timers are, starting to retire. They know how things work. How do you bring that tribal knowledge and capture that, right? And then you got the second to last one, the executives. They're looking to improve margins, productivity, growth. They want to launch new offerings and bring things to market, right? And then at the end of the day, there's customers and your partners who you interact with, and they're looking for like answers and ease of interaction, and they just want to be easier for you to deal with, bringing AI to them. So I know that's a lot of answer there, but the thing of it is everybody at the end of the day is trying to pull off this coordinated set of activities to try to bring value from this AI. But I think the biggest disconnect that comes is, you asked a bit of where's the ambition gap. It's
Yes.
trying to do this without fully getting a handle on the business needs, the technical foundations, the financial alignment, and then the big one is the culture change, right? So
Yeah.
how do you get that organization to take it, because it is, we're going to have to get used to much more experimentation and a much more fluid flow of change over time, because this value equation is going to keep changing. So I think the big shift is, and you saw kind of POC, things got stuck in POC land. We're probably going to touch on that again, but it's now because their systems are evolving. How do you take more of a systems level approach?
Hmm.
And all that we do is come in and look at how do you really weave those into the organization's technical structure,
Hmm.
financial benefits, but also executive sponsorship and KPIs, right? How do you bring all those together to make something that's going to really drive value at some point?
So to expand on the technical structure piece of this, I have a hard time having any of these conversations without trying to root back at least in some way to foundational data, right? Because
Yep.
I feel so often, we're talking about that ambition, right, and how everybody in the organization is going to come to the CFO with a
Yep.
use case of we can do AI for this, but there are some just foundational data things that are going to be
Sure.
necessary. So
Sure.
from your experience, what are those data foundations that have to be in place in order for AI to deliver the real business value aligned to kind of the priorities that you're talking about? And which
Yep.
ones are the most commonly misunderstood?
Oh, got it. Got it. Um, how do I answer that? So I think the the place I would start is that, all these AI outcomes depend on a lot more than just the data alone. It's a whole data architecture, right? So in the
Hmm.
old days, for a long time, they were just collecting data in these massive volumes of storage, right? And there's newer technologies out there which, they have their place and have value, but it's really hard to get that data out to do things, right? So I think to start with, really, we take a more of a data architecture approach where we're looking at the desired outcomes. What are you trying to get done, right? And then to achieve that, what data has to be unified, accessible, timely, but most importantly, made actionable, right? So moving data around for no reason without actually having it drive something at the end of that chain,
Hmm.
that's really the goal. Is like, what are those elements that are signals or information that will drive action, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get that together? Um, so, if you look at technologies like Data 360, which prior Data Cloud,
Hmm.
it's really taking all those different pieces, historical data, real-time signals, analytical outputs from reporting systems, and pulling them all together to basically operationalize them.
Hmm.
Um, and then I think you asked, yeah, what's the most underestimated part? I think the most underestimated part is, I was just thinking, sometimes kid that the L in LLM is language, right?
Yeah.
So, a reason I say that is that the L, if you don't have a clear understanding of what your data is, its
Hmm.
meaning across an organization,
Hmm.
and try to pull that together in a coherent way, if you have 8 divisions that have been running separately for a very long time,
Hmm.
and now you're trying to pull those pieces together. There's one client a while back. It was like, what is a piece of paper? Strangely mattered because having that consistent definition across those 8 organizations let them flow work between those groups and also not buy the exact same thing in a
Right.
different part of the right. So that common understanding of what something is, and now tools like Data Cloud can basically pull that together into a full unified picture of either the products, your order information, your customers, into that kind of full life cycle view. So it's a long answer. One way to get around to is it's what do things mean? What does that metadata mean? And how do you now with tools like data search, so you don't have to go back and rectify or remediate every single system on the back end. You can actually do that at the point where they need to come together. That lets you move a lot faster, and without going back having to do millions of dollars of retro remediation in the back. So
Yeah. So you've touched a lot on kind of the business process side of things, a little bit on
yeah.
change and kind of driving towards real business goals. So when you're thinking about how leaders should think about the relationship between AI, data, and their business processes,
Mm,
how should they do that rather than treating AI as kind of a standalone capability?
yeah. I was trying to think of like an analogy. If you think about like in the old days when there were all these BI systems, business
Mhm.
intelligence systems, tons of data, driving reports every day. Where did they go and what did they do? Right. So if you look at the evolution of AI, it was analytics, very similar thing, right? It was all locked up, kind of the data. It was hard to get it into things. So I think the thing to think about is that it's about moving that information from AI, not as something off to the side, right? It's not go over here and do AI. It really should be just weaved into the way you do work. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, you should almost not even know it's doing it, right?
Yeah.
If in the ideal world, it's making things happen, it's making things easier, it's giving you information you need, it's giving insights you need, and it's just a part of the way we do work. So it's a long way of saying the shift is from AI is this box we spun up over here, either with our own customer or we're,
Yeah.
send the data out to some vendor, um, a LLM provider, to how do we really take that and weave it really closely into the flow of work? So like example would be like, if you're doing tens of thousands of deliveries, how do you track all the shortages, the delivery themselves, damages, validating refunds, all those kind of things that could be readily resolved. And how do you take all that, automate it to make it literally just part of what people do, and also to start to shift some of that work, into things that could just be streamlined and automated, and then how do you surface other parts that you need that ambiguity set up for human interaction.
So, one thing that I've really been amazed by our organization is we've been really good at helping people identify where we can penetrate the organization with AI and
Hmm.
have really quick, immediate impact.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at the landscape right now, where do you see AI having that most immediate impact, that's really practical across sales, service, marketing, or even commerce?
Yeah. So, everybody's on a different path, a different part of this journey, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a lot of the initial work for organizations is just automating things they're already doing, right? If adding efficiencies to workflows, near-term efficiencies, adding just taking what they do without completely redoing their the way they do work, is kind of step one often. Things like sales coaching, lead nurturing, prioritizing opportunities, help with your forecasts. If you're on a call with the customer, or you're on if they're on the web, how do you take everything about them and figure out what you should offer them next, or what would be a valuable service or step you can take with them? And then on the service side, that's been a really big one, is just, AI for self-service. How do you help agents help work with clients? How do you help customers help themselves? And then a lot of organizations, they have years and years of knowledge about what they've tried to solve or what they do or how they do it, or policies. Bringing those all together to basically make that service experience much simpler and harvesting it so they get better and better over time, right? A lot of this is taking those first steps to reduce the workload, but at some point you want to improve either the experience or the consistency, or all those pieces that go into being a running that kind of an operation. And then we even have like, so that's kind of the first step, right? And then over time it'll let you do things like, one of our customers, they're moving to more of a taking those call center people and making them more as sales people, right? Slate shift from, hey, we're not just answering calls, answering questions about what's the size of the whatever. We're actually going in and saying, hey, now we can help them understand what fits their lifestyle better. What are some newer options that are out there they might not be aware of, right? So taking those resources that would otherwise be sampling very simple things and moving them. Um, and then there's some other one, I could go on. There's a lot. Every if you go to commerce, right, there's
Yeah.
guided commerce and personalization. Um, so to sum it all up, it's driving a lot of like practical organizational efficiencies,
Yeah.
visibility, those kind, while you're thinking of or staging all those transformational changes, right? So get up quickly, get some organizational readiness, and then build towards some of those bigger changes.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that everybody's kind of on their own journey in because every AI use case, every organization and where they're going to be in this is really unique. But something that's not unique is the role of real time data
Yeah,
in AI. So when we're thinking about trusted real time data, how important is that in moving from experimentation with AI to scalable enterprise grade solutions?
sure, sure. So I'm going to change the question a little bit. So
Yeah.
it's not really the question is it real time? Is it actionable and timely enough to drive decisions? We kind of hinted about that earlier. So if you think about or data across an organization, different use cases require different levels of freshness, right? Some things are real time. Did they just go on the web and did they just make an inquiry? Now they have an issue that needs to flow and you need to pull their last thing. You need snappy, right? In some financial situations, that resolution, that thing doesn't happen until overnight, right? So you don't need real time necessarily. You just need timely, relevant data. And the reason I'm talking about that is, if you think about the there's trade-offs every time you try to do data real time. But so the key is really what's the level that you need to drive the outcomes you're trying to get to.
Mhm.
And what we do is we usually will come in and look at, map out what that use case is and some future use cases. And again, think about it more of a data architecture.
Mhm.
How do we move and transform that data with the timeliness, relevancy, quality, metadata understanding that will actually get them to drive those use cases, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think if you say the overall thing is freeing up data and freeing up the flow of information, that's one thing. Real time is a word in of itself, right? So I think I'll go back to kind of the actionable and relevant data.
So another thing that I'm glad you brought up that I want to bring back into this conversation is change. And I think my
Mm,
my strategy background makes me have to shoehorn change in every conversation that I have with a senior leader. But a lot of organizations just struggle with simple adoption after
yeah,
AI is implemented. So
yeah.
what separates the companies that these initiatives stick versus those that it stalls?
Got it. Got it. I know I keep doing this to your question, so I'm going to reframe it a little bit.
Please,
So,
please, please.
I, 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 I think the key thing is if we reframe our time horizon, I
Yeah.
think the key to adoption is it doesn't start after implementation, right? It starts during design.
Yeah.
So if you think about it a little bit, it's like if you really bring stakeholders in early and they understand the why and not just the what, why are we doing this? Um, and we align that with strong change management and clear KPIs from executives and executive support and build in system instrumentation as we're building it. Because at the end of the day, you need this virtuous cycle of people adopting it, value creation, and executives actually seeing that and supporting and driving investments back into that, right? Either just through encouragement, through monitoring, whatever it is. Um, and also, if you think about that early adoption, it helps people organization identify champions, find points of resistance, right? Where do we need to, because, some people see this as a threat. How do we help them see that there's value for this in that for them, how they do the job, how they're going to be able to react, and, help address those change items to that might slow momentum. Um, one other area to think about too is with the whole vibe coding thing.
Mhm.
Salesforce loves to come out with Salesforce vibes, and even before that, some of the best customers would set up environments where power users could get trained. They can actually experiment with the product, help craft an experience they would like to have from the product. They can kind of vibe up hey, I want my data to look like this, right? And then hand that off to dev teams that can actually harden that, or partners to make that really a production grade thing. So letting them be part of that buy-in to help craft that experience will obviously make them more apt to use it afterwards and feel like they've had a part of the process. So I think that's going to be an area to watch, as that's going to open up like new ways to help take down some of that friction. So
So we've talked a lot about kind of the speed to scale. How can organizations do this,
sure.
get to their AI future really quickly? But the flip side of that is risk, right?
Yep.
So as companies are trying to balance that equation, right? Speed to
Yep.
value versus governance and risk.
Sure.
How should companies be thinking about it, especially in kind of the more regulated and data sensitive environments?
Yeah, yeah. And I personally spent a lot of time in those spaces. So I think the first step is to recognize that not all AI and all AI projects carry the same risk, right? So there are going to be areas where requirements are extraordinarily high, and we have and work to work within those when we need to, right?
Mhm.
Data sensitivity, right to be forgotten. There's like a million parts you have to, GDPRs and all the rest that have to be accounted for. Um, but if you look at an organization that might be starting out, I'll give an example. I was talking to a wealth management company,
Mhm.
and they were like, "I'll never use AI." This one division,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Sure you will," and like never. And I was like, "Look, you use a lot of signals, right? You
Mhm.
look for life events, who's died, who bought a house, who's a million life events. You're out there in open source trying to get signals to inform you whether you should re-engage with that customer, whether they're going to churn because the minute for these things, this minute the primary person passes away or whatever, the money's usually gone. They don't stay, right?
Mhm.
So getting ahead of that and using AI to do those non-regulated type of work. And
Mhm.
yes, you can flow it into your regulated stream and go through that whole, there's a lot of AI we can do with that too. But I think it's stratifying where those risks are and getting started and comfortable, knowing how to build those boundaries. And then the other side is that, with Salesforce, there's a lot of the whole trust layer. There's industry accelerators that try to capture and codify a lot of that to bring best practices and things like that to help move faster without, sacrificing compliance.
So I'm going to follow up a loaded question with another loaded question. So just deep breath
Okay,
here.
sure,
But
sure.
so when we think about what AI ready architecture means, right? And for those just listening, I'm saying that in quotations. What does that actually
Yeah.
mean in practice, particularly within existing Salesforce and data ecosystems?
Yeah, and this one I'm going to answer straight. So, uh,
Okay.
so, so, uh, so I would kind of say, if you think about AI is really a journey right now.
Yeah.
It's not a destination. It's moving too fast. That said, we talked earlier about identifying near-term value, right? Re- Build some near-term value, build a scalable architecture that actually will be expandable and adaptable to a lot of the patterns that we're seeing. And will eventually, in this case of Salesforce, provide context for Agentforce like Data 360 can do, right? So basically letting Data 360 be the bridge out to MCPs, out to the Snowflakes and Databricks and all the different environments that you might need to touch ERP and consolidate that data, make it actionable in the case of Salesforce. It's funny, I wasn't thinking of bringing this up, but I think I was. Some people have a misconception that it's become like another data place where you just drop data. It's more about making the data, think about it, it's almost like a bit of middleware. It's making that data freely flowing between all these systems and just enough data, just enough transformation to make it actionable with Salesforce, right? So think about it as like a transformation layer in the middle. It's not
Sure.
necessarily a big place to dump data, right? And there's a big misperception on that. So back to the real time thing, how much data literally really needs to be in Data 360? How much data has to transit through Data 360? That's something we work through. Really digging down into what data needs to be staged there, what data just needs to be accessed from there. Um, Because at the end of the day, you want to bring all the use cases, the ERP data. Might have multiple orgs, integration platforms, enterprise stores, identity security. Bringing all that together. It sounds like a lot of pieces, but there's pretty ready patterns that we know to follow, right? So how do we bring that all together to have the minimum near-term impact to systems, to pull that data out and get the value? Or sometimes it is that transformation thing. How do we move the current platform to the newest version to make the most out of marketing cloud or industry clouds, or do things that'll help provide that future acceleration?
Mhm.
There are times where sometimes we're getting some value while we're also doing these transformational shifts to say, hey, we know a lot of these tools have, in the last 5-10 years have moved up a lot in capability, but they're going to be the launch pad to get the value from the AI in the future. So how do we help you, move along that path? That too, because vendors are, no surprise, investing tons of money into bringing more and more depth and more capabilities weaved through the application. So how do we help take advantage of the thing you're already invested in and basically get that value from the investments you're making already? So
I'm going to now follow up those two very loaded questions and bring it a little closer to home. So when we
sure,
look at
sure.
the role of service providers in evolving
Mhm.
AI, right? How does a service provider how are they helping companies get embedded across platforms rather than just delivering kind of isolated product projects?
Sure, sure, sure. So yeah, we do get stuff done, right? So
Yeah.
to the early point.
Yeah.
So without that, none of that would matter. So yeah, getting stuff done. But I think it's a bit more than that. We have the luxury of working across so many industries and so many customers. And we're very embedded in the technology. So we get to see a lot of the use cases and where these use cases are emerging or evolving or maturing, that we can bring even across the industries. I think it also helps. It's helping the customers design toward the future, right? We have a close relation with Salesforce as summer partner, so we're all in on Salesforce, right? And we really work to help identify where the technology is going to, and where we can help stage that for future value. Either bring it in nearer, or do the things that will let you capture that later, right? You want to, back to the earlier point, it if you're invested in a platform, it makes sense as best you can to align and try to capture the value they're already building into it. So how do we help do that? Um, and then I think there's another part too, which is, if you look at how OSF engages, we also have our managed services thing, where we're more of a walk. We're going to be there to walk it with you too, as a long-term partner, um, and help engage over time, just where we can help you find new high value solution areas, and you know help drive the success of the project along the way. So it's a bit of getting stuff done, but also being there to help through the adoption, and help even long term, if you need somebody to help actually maintain and make sure that that thing's up and operational, or working with your staff to do that.
Fantastic. So to end here, I'll just ask this. If I'm a leader listening to this and I want one piece of advice from Jeff on
Yeah.
where I should start on my AI and data journey today to avoid wasted effort, where should I start?
I probably got more than one, but I
Yeah,
got
I'm
a
sure.
couple.
I'm sure.
uh, so, uh, so I think the first thing I recognize is, the changes like we said in the beginning, they're coming in months, not years, and it really is accelerating quicker. If I look at, I'm into vibe coding too. If I look at what I could do a year now from a year ago,
Mhm.
it's mind-boggling, the deltas, right? And that's only coming, and it's only weaving it into the enterprise space. So my first advice is a simple thing: get started, right? I always say to my kids, the hardest part of getting started is getting started. In a way, getting started, if you haven't, and there's a lot of, even big companies, there's a lot of divisions that haven't even taken that first step. It'd be really looking at some use cases that can drive near-term value, get some learnings. And another piece of advice is that, it's funny, I was at a round table where everybody was talking about ROI, ROI, ROI. And yes, that's very true, right? The only thing is, the ROI today is, it's hard to gauge a little bit, right? So we don't know necessarily 100% where the ROI is going to come because we're learning our way through this. So yes, you want to have KPIs, you want to measure ROI, you want to try to gauge and predict ROI. The ROI is much bigger, right? So my advice is when you step back and look at it, don't just look at numbers, right? You got to look at the corporate readiness to use these tools. How ready is your staff getting? How comfortable are they getting? How are you establishing your guidelines, your policy, your governance, your auditing, right? You can start to get that in place. And that's ROI too, right? Because without that, you're gonna have a hard time getting to the next increment. And over time, it's gonna get, people are charging ahead on this, and some spaces are moving very quickly. So don't think about it as just a dollar, right? It's how are you getting ready to capture the value and really bring efficiencies to your company, to leverage those tools. And then and just a few more. I think I would say to really think about get think about your staff, giving them the ability to explore, right? So we sometimes will do labs, hackathons, things like that to drive ideation and get people participating. So find opportunities to up level the staff and let them start to get a feel for this stuff in a corporate setting, right? How do we make it safe and accessible for them to explore and see where they can bring the value in a corporate setting? Um, and then, yeah, just be ready to just keep assessing and capturing the value kind of in steps, right? Get some value, reassess, take another look, because in 6 months there's going to be more places to get more value from this stuff. So I think we're going to see much more of a ratcheting over time of, get some value, get some learning, move to the next thing. And yeah, the last bit of advice, no surprise, I would say, at OSF, we're here to help work through all that. And we're we're immersed across industries and technologies and, working to help customers every day. So, feel free to reach out to us and, let us help you with your journey. So
Words right out of my mouth. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today.
sure, sure. No, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Business Transformation by OSF Digital. Follow us for more episodes and visit osf.digital to learn more.